You have accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lanterns Myron Rumsey and Bill Giancoli, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome back to the podcast of OA. This is episode 119. I'm Bill Giancoli, and I'm joined, as always, the guardian of the blog of OA, the creator of all that we know of the podcast and blog of OA, Myron Rumsey. How are you, Myron?
Hey, Bill, I'm doing really good. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing very well. I got a nice drink of water here, and the kids, I think, are down for the count, and so life is good.
That's great. That's great. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. We haven't recorded in a little while, but we have some big news to talk about, and we've got the whole Zod's Will arc that just concluded this week to discuss and go over, and lots of good stuff, I hope.
Yeah, a little extra stuff with the Green Lantern Earth 1, and just like we do all the time, right? So let's do it.
That's right. All right, we'll be right back after these messages.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Myron, as you said in the opening, it's been a little while since we've been recording, so there's a lot of news and notes to cover, and we're going to start off with Robert Venditti announcing his leave date, leave issue is going to be 50. So, a lot of questions out there, Myron.
Yeah. It's interesting. The day before he broke that, I was commenting on the fact that on the blog that he had just been announced to be doing a Hawkman relaunch. And I was thinking about the fact that, well, he's doing a Hawkman relaunch. He's got the new Damage book that he's writing, part of the New Age of Heroes. That's 3 series for a writer, and at least one of them is a twice monthly. So that's 4 books a month when you sit back and think about it. Is this time for him to leave? Coupled with the fact that it seems like there's some things in the Green Lantern universe that might be changing. For example, over in the Justice League books, they've stopped printing Justice League. It's on its final issue, and then they're doing a month-long event called No Justice, and then they're relaunching 3 different Justice League books, one by Scott Snyder, and I can't remember the writers and artist teams on the other books, but the main Justice League book has John Stewart. So that begs the question, well, if John Stewart is in the Justice League, is he really going to be leading the Green Lantern Corps at the same time? That seems like a lot to ask of anybody. And
a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. And so I was thinking, well, maybe, given the sales figures of the books, because the books are not, I don't think, at cancellation level, but they really aren't performing the way that they've been in the past. I mean, back during the Jeff Johns era, Green Lantern was kind of second only to Batman when it came to DC's sales leaders. And right now, the Green Lanterns book is the lowest selling twice a month book that DC has. And the Hal Jordan book isn't that much further behind that. The Green Lanterns book, I think, is selling right around 25,000 copies an issue. And the Hal Jordan book is right around 32,000 per issue. So not a huge thing, but take all those things together and it kind of signals that change is on the horizon. And the next day, Robert Venditti goes, hey, I just turned in the script for 47. I guess now is as good as time as any to say that I'm leaving with issue 50 and I've enjoyed my time and so on and so forth. So I read the tea leaves right, which made me really happy.
I have you all with a giant green turban on and just like
I've got bones that I'm showing rolling on the ground. Yeah. The Robert Venditti thing happened to be posted by him on Twitter while I was on my way to Toronto, Canada. So I stopped at a rest stop and quickly did an article on my phone to post the information out there. And my wife was like giving me one of those eye rolling looks, like, really? Come on. But
well, like what? Like a truck stop or what?
One of the rest stops on the highway. You pull over and there's the restaurants and one of the service centers. Though? Yeah, that was one of those service centers you stop on the highway. And but I got one of the eye rolls, which I thought was hysterical. I'm like, it's news. It doesn't they don't plan it and check my schedule. It's I've tried. They don't listen.
Bless your wife's heart.
And then a couple days later, they announced one of the other Justice League books is going to have Jessica Cruz on the team, but no Simon Baz. So,
really?
Yeah. So what does this all mean? My tea leaves aren't telling me anything in particular, but obviously we're going to have a new writer. And Ethan Van Sciver at one point recently talked about how he might be doing another character this year. So is this a case of the creative teams are all going to shuffle? We just had WonderCon this past weekend, and they announced some new things, but not any of those kind of big changes. So it's really kind of up in the air. I don't have any idea of who's going to take over, although one person who's kind of an industry insider seems to know what is going to happen, and all that person has said is that it's going to be really exciting and big and people are going to like it. What that means, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it sounds big and exciting, though.
Okay. It's me. I'm writing it. No. That would be neither big nor exciting. But, I guess I'd throw the question out there. If you could pick who would it be, who would you like to see write it? If we look at somebody,
I would like somebody somebody who has never touched it before, but would bring, I don't know. See, I don't know. I would go back to naming some really a Frank Miller. I would like to see what Frank Miller did. Frank Miller got me into Daredevil, and I was never really into Daredevil before Frank Miller. Yeah,
I could see that. I'm kind of leaning towards. Do you remember the book that came out during the Dark Side War? That was the Green Lantern special. It was written by Tom King. And I would love to see Tom King do it. I don't see that happening because he's busy doing Batman stuff and some other things. But his take on Hal in that book was really good, and he also has some history writing Kyle in the Omega Men. So I'd love to see him or Scott Snyder, although he's doing Justice League. So I don't see that happening either. I don't know who else it could be. I mean, with Bendis coming over, everybody was saying, well, maybe he's going to write the Green Lantern books, but I don't see Bendis writing Green Lanterns, and I'm not sure I want him to be quite honest. Not that I'm against his work, but I've not read anything from him that I've really liked. He's very controversial. People either love him or hate him.
Well, I would like to see Myron Rumsey write it.
People would not like what I would do.
First issue, Kyle, boom, gone.
Actually, I would not kill Kyle. I would not kill him. A couple
tied to two sons.
A couple other ones, maybe. But anyway,
Myron's renegade issue. Yeah, people would talk about it for years.
Yeah. I would probably have
remember the Rumsey run?
It lasted 3 issues. Yeah,
three horrific issues.
Editorial said I could do what I wanted.
Hey, it'd have balls. That's all I say.
Yeah, it would be pretty ballsy. I probably would get a lot of hate mail. I'd probably get some death threats. I'd come home and there'd be pitchforks and get people with pitchforks and torches in my yard. And they wouldn't be over for barbecue either. So,
we'll give never mind. I was going to give a fake address and then.
Yeah, that wouldn't go too well, I don't think.
Yeah, somebody at 123 Main Street is getting rushed
right now. In every town, there's a riot going on now. In other news, Green Lantern Earth 1 came out not too long ago, a couple weeks, and maybe we'll at some point dip into that and do a whole episode. But it's a pretty dense read. It's a hardcover graphic novel, a lot of pages to it. What I can say about it, if you haven't picked it up, it is worth picking up. This is a very modern and cinematic take on the Green Lantern lore. They do abandon some things that are very familiar because they're looking at it from a completely different lens. This is a modernization of the Hal Jordan origin, and there are some elements that are the same, but the Green Lantern Corps, for example, doesn't really exist. They've been gone for a long time. They are the air quote stuff of legend. And so Hal gets the ring, and he doesn't know what the Green Lantern Corps is. He just knows he has this tool, and he's brought into some circumstances that allow him to use it, and it leaves itself open for a lot of things that could happen going down the road if they do another volume. I think it's been very well received, at least from a critical viewpoint. I don't know what the sales figures are for it yet, but the creative team is Gabriel Hardman and Corinne Bachko, which is a husband and wife duo. They both co-wrote it, and then Gabriel Hardman did the artwork. And Hardman did artwork on movies like Interstellar and The Dark Knight Rises and Inception. And so his artwork style, it's a little on the sketchy side, which is, and I don't mean sketchy as in
like shady.
Not shady. Well, but it is shady too.
It's the style is.
Yeah, it looks. He did a lot of storyboards, so it actually looks like storyboards for a movie in a lot of places, and in some ways that's really good. In some ways, maybe not so much. Depends on what you like. But I thought that, the coloring and so on is a little bit muted. So when he uses the ring, it really stands out because everything is kind of, I don't want to say grayish, but there's just not not necessarily a lot of color. And I think some of that's symbolicism as well. But I really kind of thought, this is a very sci-fi take. Hal's not a test pilot. Hal is an astronaut, and he comes from the NASA days, and NASA's long gone, and he's one of these kind of people like anybody else who is kind of not sure if they've done the most with their life they could do, and then this opportunity comes along, and he makes the most of it. And it isn't about, if you read interviews with Hardman and Bachko, they'll say that the ring doesn't choose Hal. The ring will work for anyone, which opens up a different perspective on the character in that Hal is a hero not because of the ring, but he's a hero in spite of the ring, and the ring gives him the ability to do more than he would normally be able to do and really be the person he wants to be, if that makes sense. I almost get an Alien feel from some of it. It's a very Giger-esque, especially in the beginning. So
say that one more time.
It's very Giger-esque. Giger, H.R. Giger.
Oh, Giger. Yeah, okay, yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of that, especially in the beginning when Hal first finds the ring. But if you aren't sure about it, I know it's kind of an expensive book because it's a hardcover. I think the cover price is like $25. But I did find it worthwhile. I thought it was really good, and I've enjoyed a lot of the Earth One books so far. But I do think this is my favorite because this could have been what Rebirth was for Green Lantern, because it's such a different. I don't want to say different. It's such a different and fresh take, yet still familiar, that it could have been what Rebirth could have been for the Green Lanterns had they done like the New 52 approach and started all over again.
And it's I'm looking at a little bit of it here, and I do see where anybody could use the ring. It almost looks like this would have been this could have been the actual movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because it could have been the movie. It could have been storyboards for a film, and actually, I think it would have been a much better movie than what we got, to be very honest. From
just my brief look, I would almost say it looks like it's going in that right direction, but I would need more time with it, though. But no, it's a very cool looking book. I like the art.
Yeah, I think my only criticism is that my copy of the cover was really tight, and so I struggled a little bit getting the book to stay open, and now that I had it open, it doesn't want to close all the way.
Oh, really?
But I think that just might be my copy.
So it's like, I know what you mean. Those are hard to read in bed. You're like constantly flopping.
Yeah. Well, this one doesn't flop. It's just, it doesn't want to open.
Well, that's what I mean. You try to keep it open. You have to keep your hand on it and try to read. Yeah.
And I'm afraid it's going to break the binding, but I've been working at it to try to get it a little bit looser. Your last two episodes. So, Bill, this is your news, so I'll leave that to you.
I'm going to be leaving. I feel like, the follow Robert Venditti leaving at 50. There's a little bit less significance here, but I will be leaving the podcast of OA after episode 120. This has been a great podcast. I've been honored to be a part of it and had some great times with it. And I just think it's, time for me to fly, as REO Speedwagon would say. Yeah. I was going to do that music, or sing it. That would be awful.
Oh, that would be awful. Yeah, the listenership would go way down. But I know. But this podcast is your brainchild, really, because this was your idea. But we've been doing this now for almost 7 years, and you've got the 7-year itch. Was Sam and
even Sam born?
I don't think Sam was even born yet, was he?
Yeah. No.
So, you've in the meantime, you've grown a young family, and that is, of course, a very major time commitment. And obviously that comes first. And, it's hard to keep up with the comics world, especially right now when you've got 4 books a month going on. And, we have not been talking about Green Lanterns primarily just because you really haven't had time to read it. And you and I both came to the joint decision that, who wants to listen to 2 people grouse about the same thing? We share the same viewpoint, and it's not necessarily a positive one. That's not necessarily entertaining for people. So we'll shy away from that. But yeah,
we were getting into like just, doing kind of just ripping it apart more than anything. Yeah,
and that's not entertaining, and I don't want to turn people off. But for you, it's been difficult, I think, to find time to record, and people can see that we don't have as many episodes as we usually do, and that's part of it. Part of it is I'm getting older too, and sometimes it's hard to find time in real life to make time for this kind of a commitment. It really is. And doing a podcast is a commitment. It's not something we get paid for. It's work to plan and organize and sit down and record and then edit and release. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, arranging interviews and stuff. And it is difficult, but I want to save some of this for obviously your final episode, but this has been your baby. So you of course know, regardless of whatever happens, you're always welcome to come back for guest segments. And where I'm hoping at some point when time frees itself up, you will dive into some of the creative parts of it, some of the things we did early on that kind of got away from us, like some of the Green Lantern 101 segments and those kind of things that were an awful lot of fun.
Well, Myron, it's our baby. I may have birthed it, but you, you nurtured it.
This is really going to a bad place.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think you are the soul here. You're the will of it all because you were doing all this research. The blog was there and everything. I simply said, "Hey, why don't we put voices to it?" And and I think it's time for you to, I think you could really get it to the pace that you can do it at, which is great because I have other creative projects that that I'm always trying to tinker with something. That's kind of me, but with kids and everything, you got to find those pockets of time creativity. So I would definitely love to help out here and there. Maybe bring back some of the interview things again. That would be a little more freeing if we can, you know what I mean?
Right, so. Right. Well, it's 7 years. You've got the 7-year itch, and you're leaving me for a much younger podcast.
Yeah, well, yeah. If I'm not going to a podcast, but yeah, a much younger, a much younger blogger. Sorry, it's over. I'm going to what would be the Marvel equivalent of Green Lantern?
Nova. Nova Corps.
Yeah, I'm the Nova Corps.
This is the part where you say it's not you, it's me.
Yeah. What would that be? The blog of Nova or You're dead to me, Bill. You're dead to me.
All right. I gotta go get some Botox tomorrow. Anyway, we'll be back in a few minutes, and we'll start talking about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps and Zod's Will.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
And we're back. So we've got some comics to talk about, namely Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, issues 37 through 41, the 5-part Zod's Will arc, as we get to see the Green Lanterns take on a Kryptonian bad guy, somebody that's more known for fighting Superman. So, Bill, what was your thought about this arc?
Great 5 issues. It's going to be a great trade, action-packed, but as we were talking off mic, not just action-packed, but a good underlying theme about and kind of, narrative of, where, can you commit somebody being a criminal? Can somebody be a criminal prior to actually a crime? So it was kind of thought-provoking amongst all the fists and cuffs that was going on there. So, I really enjoyed it. It's just like my flavor. It's kind of like what you want to see with the Green Lanterns, and a lot of great constructs. We get to learn more about Hal's ring that he willed himself. So we get to learn more about that and some of the capabilities there that were, I don't know how you felt about them, but I thought those were cool additions. Got to learn more about John Stewart, which was great as a leader and everything. And a little more about the Guardians. So, I mean, I think all around this was like, I would say this is one of these 5 issues that you're going to look back at in maybe a couple of years and go, yeah, that was a lot of significance was happening right in there, as far as the building of the Green Lanterns.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There was some criticism on some of these issues saying, well, nothing really happened. It didn't move the story forward. This is being written for the trade. It was a lot of slugfest. But, as you mentioned, there's some things going on underneath the surface. So you could look at the story as just an action story, as a good guy, bad guy story, sure. But I think underneath, there was some interesting stuff going on that was kind of subtle. And I really respect Robert Venditti for the way he approached the topic because, as you mentioned, a criminal being judged guilty before they've committed a crime. Zod's got this history of being a bad guy, and when Kyle and Hal show up, they immediately go to Rings Ablazing. And by the time you get to the end of the arc, you've got the Guardians who are trying to reassert themselves in control of the Corps, saying, he really hasn't done anything wrong here. The people that on the planet Jakul they're not under oppression. They're willingly following Zod, and he's really not breaking any laws. So it's one of those things where, this guy, we all know that he can't be trusted. And as the story pans out, he can't be trusted. We know this. But because he really hasn't done anything wrong, other than, he's reacted with violence, and he's taken them as basically political prisoners, for lack of a better analogy. It's how do you judge it? And what I respect Venditti for doing is that I think we have... There's a common practice that writers have when they want to tell a story about something that maybe is topical or something that represents a point of view. They tend to write one side of the story, and it's usually their opinion of what that side of the story is, but they kind of hit the reader over the head with it. I'll draw, and I don't want to get into Green Lanterns bashing, but if you look at the story recently with the Angarans over in the Green Lanterns book and the Molites, where the Molites were refugees, Tim Seeley kind of hit you over the head with this point of view. And yeah, we get the perspective that these people were xenophobic and it's a bad thing and so on, but there was no attempt to make us think about it. It was more of a, hey, here's a bad thing that I think is wrong and I'm going to hit you over the head with it. And what Robert Venditti did is he made you think about it a little bit when he gets to the end. I mean, you're all rooting for the Green Lanterns, and you're cheering for Hal when he's taking Zod on in this most recent issue. You were finally seeing a Green Lantern go against a Kryptonian no-holds-barred cage match, and it's really exciting and very visually stimulating. And he gets to the end, and he's about ready to arrest Zod, and the Guardians show up and say, wait a minute, you put him down, let him go. And it makes you think a little bit when you start thinking about it from that other perspective. Yeah, the Green Lanterns kind of prejudged Zod before they could prove he actually did anything wrong. And I thought that was kind of the interesting subtext, because you could certainly see it from Hal and Kyle's side and the whole Green Lantern side. And then the Guardians present that opposing viewpoint in a very subtle way. It wasn't like they beat me over the head with it. But it made me as a reader sit back and think about it differently. And I think that's what good storytellers do, is they make you think about that stuff. Now, sure, you could read this book and not even consider that stuff at all and just read it as an action piece and still get the stuff out of it. But I thought that layer was really kind of well done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and I think that's where Robert Venditti would be kind of missed, because I think we've talked about this before. He's kind of a long form writer.
Yeah.
And there's part of me that wonders if here's where it's going to get iffy. So what was that? It ends on issue 41, right?
Yep.
So is Zod going to make a return somewhere within the Venditti run? Maybe not, but I'm wondering if it would, that hands off any other writer behind that. That's like, hey, if you get stuck, you have a foundation for later stories. Yeah,
the writer that comes over and takes over for Robert Venditti, there's been enough things that he's left plot threads out there that could be picked up and developed on that a writer would have some material if he wanted to use it. I think that's again one of his strengths, is that he kind of lays the foundation for things, and he may not pick up on every single thing he does, but he tries to make sure that when he brings a story forward, that there's something that occurred in the past that kind of goes along with it to make it feel organic. And I think that's one of Venditti's strengths as a writer, that and trying to juggle, and sometimes more successfully than others, trying to juggle a cast that's as large as this on a twice a month basis is no easy task. One of the things that kicked off this whole arc was the return of the Guardians and them kind of assuming control, and the whole angle between the Guardians and John really doesn't trust the Guardians, but the Guardians tell John, hey, we need you, and so on. And then the first thing that comes up is this whole situation with Zod, and John is kind of at odds with the Guardians. He's like, what's taking you so long to make up your mind? We have somebody stuck, on this planet that's a prisoner, and we need to go rescue them. And they took a different stance than he expected, which, it's good drama. That's for sure. That's one thing.
Do you think that this was all Jon Stewart setting the Guardians up?
I don't know if it's necessarily him setting them up, but I think he really doesn't trust them, and he's looking at them with he's looking at them through very critical eyes. I think this is more of a case of John is not going to be the leader of the Green Lantern Corps after issue 50, in my mind, and this is setting the stage for that departure. At least in my head, that's what I think is going to happen. I could be completely wrong, but knowing he's going to be, on the Justice League, I don't see him being able to manage both roles. And I know that Robert Venditti has been talking to other writers about things. For example, I don't know if you've been reading DC Metal, but the last issue of that series that Scott Snyder's working on came out this week, and there's actually references to the Dark Star story arc that's coming up next issue is mentioned in there as a foreshadowing piece. So I know they're collaborating, and Scott Snyder's writing the book with Jon Stewart in it. So it would not surprise me if they've kind of said, hey, I want Jon Stewart to be used. Is there a way you can make him free from his role so that I can use him freeingly?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, well, there's part of me that was wondering if he'd ever really wanted to quit, Yeah,
no, I'm not sure. Some people are not happy with him being in the leadership role because he's not as active as usual. But then there are those who've been crying for him to be a leader for a long time. So, you can't please all the people all the time. And I think
the leader fits him a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. I did like the spot in this last issue where he basically sides with the Guardians because, he's a former soldier. He's following the orders. He kind of gets it when he sits back and analyzes it all. And he talks Hal off the ledge because Guardians show up and say, let him go. And Hal's like, I don't think so. And John says, that's an order, and Hal lets him go. And later on, they have a conversation, and John says, you got to trust me. And Hal does, which I think is good. It shows the dynamic of the relationship. I think if there's anything in this story that bothered me at all was the whole thing at the end where he and John are talking and Hal's reflecting on the issue where he and Superman deal with Hector Hammond. And there's that whole thing about, maybe sometimes we should take care of some of the threats permanently. And I thought that was a little out of character, but at the same time, I got to imagine that goes through Hal's mind, just that it's not something that's vocalized.
Well, that's, we're seeing that twice now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. That doesn't seem like a coincidence. I don't know.
A part of me wonders, years ago, are you at all familiar with the Dark Stars at all, Bill?
You explained them before, but they were like basically the Malaysians enemies.
The controllers, yes.
The controllers, but they were the answer to the Manhunters, correct?
Right. It was their version of the Corps, essentially. And when the Green Lantern Corps went kind of belly up, the Dark Stars kind of came forward, and you kind of wonder if and again, this is me armchair quarterbacking and trying to look at the tea leaves. Is Robert Venditti planting the seeds for dissension among the ranks for some of the members of the Corps to become Dark Stars? In the past, Aricia was a Dark Star, and so is John Stewart and Selak and a couple other ones. Is he creating a situation where maybe we're going to split one or more of the Lanterns off the book to start another book? Who knows? There's lots of possibilities.
Well, so
yeah. What did you think about the whole Laura Zod Guy Gardner bit? I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, it was, I wanted him to hit the kid. I wanted at least just one final. I like that the kid was beating him. You're getting the idea that these Kryptonians are very strong, but I wanted him to be like at least one good shot and just be like, okay, yeah. And I understand if anything, I felt that was maybe a little heavy-handed of when we were talking about themes and how, that was I'm not going to strike a kid and let them just beat the hell out of me, without an attempt of really taking control. I don't know. It bothered me. And it's weird because, seeing Guy Gardner get beat up like that is kind of funny. But at the same time, I was like, there's enough is enough. You're a Green Lantern. Put the kid down. He's a Kryptonian. I'm sure you can take it.
Yeah. I thought the dialogue was humorous. It reminded me a little bit of the, you wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you? That old joke, and with the lore of, you wouldn't hit a kid, would you? I would have loved to have seen Guy Gardner respond, but I kind of liked his response in a way, wait until you're 18, that kind of thing. It was kind of funny. It added some levity to the moments. Kyle, I think one of the things about this particular story that got me was, you read books long enough and you realize people are not in any real peril. But sometimes you wonder, when the story is written well enough, you start to worry about a character. And I honestly was worried about Kyle. I honestly thought, geez, are they gonna get rid of Kyle? Because there was that whole thing during the Omega Men where he was thought to have been beheaded, and I'm thinking,
they've heard our episodes 95 through 115.
I almost, I was worried that they were going to do something there because, the Green Lantern franchise is very crowded, and they haven't found much for Kyle to do. If you're going to do something drastic with the franchise, killing off somebody isn't a bad way to do it. And, I'm glad that they didn't, but for the first time in a long time, I actually was concerned that they were going to kill a character off. And
well, Kyle's also, he's been on that operating table a few times over the last, couple arcs. So, I mean, maybe this is like, when you tell the old football player, hey, maybe that was one concussion too many.
Kyle can take a beating. That we know that for sure.
Yeah, seriously. He was all broken up and ribs, and he's going back under the knife. I mean, after a while, you would think, geez.
I love the whole issue where he gets Hal's ring. Hal sends him on his way with his ring. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really, he does Hal does the plan where he doesn't let Kyle stay behind and go and find help. He sends Kyle to find help, and he takes the brutality of it, which I thought was a very noble thing. But then you've got Kyle with Hal's ring on, and the ring has got him supercharged, and he starts quoting Halisms, which I thought was hysterically funny.
It was kind of interesting how that all kind of how he bonded with the ring, and he was like 1 and 2 people. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of neat. The fact that the Halisms are coming out and he can't stop himself, I really related to that because, you know how I am. There are times when I cannot stop some of the things that come out of my mouth.
Just so you know, a little fun fact about Myron and Bill, they're not allowed to sit with each other at meetings. I think that was our first side.
Yeah, we've caused a little bit of a ruffle here and there, so we're no longer allowed to sit next to each other in a meeting. So
come on. Myron got up, he kicked the little stone near his chair.
But the last meeting we had, I did sit next to you and nobody said anything. So we'll see.
No, I know. I was trying to be good.
I was intentionally baiting to see what would happen.
Look, yeah.
Aha! But
remember, I'm just a heads up. Just remember, I don't have as much experience as you there.
But yeah, no, I have a terrible problem where my brain goes into pun mode and I cannot shut it off when it starts. It's awful because they come to me and they have to come out of my mouth. My mouth will not let them not come out, and I get myself in more trouble that way.
Yeah. I know it. I know sometimes it's just the filter's gone, and you could see it was almost like the firestorm kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right.
Which I thought was cool. I liked it. It was making the ring interesting. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. From what I gathered, and I just don't know if it was as clear, or maybe I'm just not that great of a reader. Who knows? But it was how then was able to transport himself into the ring, or was that Kyle's idea?
I think it was kind of like he figured if he got the two of them close together, they would essentially connect to each other. That if he could get the ring close enough to Hal, that he could merge with it. And, he comes out guns a-blazing. And this whole last issue it's just, I don't know. It was a lot of fun to watch them. Visually it was interesting. Obviously Hal goes to a lot of pilot constructs and things. And, people will sometimes say, well, that's not very creative. But you put yourself in the fight of your life against a Kryptonian where the odds are stacked against you, and you're not worried about whether your constructs are elegant or not. You're going to do what gets the job done, and he goes from what's the easiest thing for him to think about because he doesn't have time to think. This is a fight of instinct and reaction, and you go with what you know, and you see it happen here. As you see, every time there's a big fight like this, it's just, I enjoy the heck out of it, and I know because Hal's my guy, I'm obviously a little biased in that regards. But just seeing him cut loose like that against Zod was great. And, another thing I've got to give Venditti credit for, not once did Zod tell Hal and Kyle that they had to kneel before him. I thought the story elevated Zod to an A-list villain again. We got to see a different side of him. He really, there's that nobility of, I want to restore Krypton no matter the cost. And it's the no matter the cost part that's the problem.
Right.
But he's really not coming from a mustache twirling perspective, and that's what makes good characters great. We know, one of the things about this story that was kind of predictable because over in Action Comics, we see the future. There's a time travel story going on with Booster Gold and Superman, and they are fighting Zod in the future on Jakul. So it's another neat element that this feels like one universe and so on. But because that book was being published at the same time, you kind of knew, well, something's going to happen and Zod is still going to be around. He's not going to jail. But we didn't know how it was going to happen. And that was the kind of the saving grace of the ending like that. But I think this was a fun read from beginning to end. I think, as you said, this is going to read very well in trade.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, did you notice this too? And I forget, is the gorilla, can he change size? Or is he just really big naturally?
He's big, but he's not King Kong big. So
like
I
Mighty
think,
Joe Young?
Yeah, he's almost, he's more Mighty Joe Young scale. Yeah. Yeah, he did look a little bigger than he should have when he appeared in this arc. And, there were little things here and there. I don't know whether you noticed, but in this most recent issue, Jon Stewart's wearing the wrong uniform. He's wearing the traditional Green Lantern Corps outfit, and not his... He's got the traditional outfit, but with his bare hands showing. Oh, but it's not cut the way that Jon Stewart's usual outfit is. And there's some little things here and there. I think there were spots where the arc wasn't exactly spot on, particularly in this last issue. But by and large, everything looked great overall. There's always little quibbles here and there, and I've given up on my perfectionist feeling of how I want everything to look exactly right. I mean, there's in the last page, Hal's got his hand up, his right hand, and there's no Green Lantern ring on it.
Huh.
but 2 panels later, it is. People. I'm a stickler for detail, so for me, it's one of those things where I get a little OCD. But I've learned to try to let some of it go. I sometimes don't do as good of a job as I'd like, but it is what it is.
Well, hey, you have standards.
That's right.
Yeah. Nobody's following you.
All right. Well, we will wrap up the conversation here shortly and come back in just a couple of minutes and wrap things up.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of Oa. You need to keep listening. Otherwise, I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
So, Myron, that wraps up episode 119. That's in the books. And we talked about a lot of news with Robert Venditti leaving on issue 50. And we were also able to cover issues 37 through 41 with Zod's Will, which is going to be a great trade, as we both agreed. So, not a bad run for Venditti, wouldn't you say?
No, not a bad run for Giancola either.
He's all right.
That kid's going to make it somewhere.
I'm not getting paid Venditti money, that's for sure.
So that wraps up another episode. One more, Bill, and then you'll be wrapping up with 120 episodes of content. So next episode will be a clip show. We'll do highlight reel. No, so we'll be back. We'll be back in a couple of weeks or so. We've got to wait for some more books to get published so we can talk about them. But we will be back.
I know we're kind of caught up. It's kind of weird that way.
It's weird to be caught up now. Yeah. So we'll be back for Bill's epic finale. Bill, you're going to do all the talking. I'm just going to sit here and listen and let you just.
I'm just gonna special outfit and everything. It's gonna be great.
You're gonna dress up for it and everything. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you I'm gonna dress up for it. You're just gonna use your imagination.
It is an audio format after all.
Yes.
But, all right.
We'll I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You first.
Okay. Well, I just want to say, no, it's great to have, I feel like I'm going out on a good run of Green Lantern. So, I mean, I couldn't be happier.
That's very true. So we should be back within a few weeks, I hope. And until then, as always, keep your power rings charged and make every day your brightest day. Take care, everybody. The Podcast of Oa is the official podcast of the blog of Oa and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. And Skype users can leave a voicemail on the show's account, Blog of Oa. Emails can be sent to greenlantern@stny.rr.com. And you can also find the blog of OA and the podcast of OA on Facebook and Google+. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The blog of OA and the podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.